Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. You were never supposed to see this, but since you have, you might as well wear it. From the vaults of the shadows, a new collection of unsettling apparel and artifacts pulled straight from the stories that were never meant to surface. Soft, worn-in shirts and hoodies that feel like something you dug out of a locked trunk in an abandoned ranger station. This isn't just merch, it's evidence. Whispers from the barkline. Prologue Ranger Log 77B, REDACTD. I tried to bury it. The root. Thought if I cut deep enough into the dirt and left it in pieces, it'd stop humming. Thought it was just some sickness in the bark. Fungal maybe, radioactive maybe, something explainable. But it grew back in the night, right through my mattress. Through my chest, I think, in the dream. My own name, it said it in my voice, but I was asleep. And it wasn't dreaming I woke into. It was inside. I think I'm part of it now. I'm writing this so whoever comes next knows. You don't hear the forest hears you. And it learns your shape, your sound. Don't talk back. Chapter 1, The Quiet Zone. March 3rd, 8:14 a.m. Carmen Velez tightened the strap of her field pack as her boots crunched across the frost-stiffened gravel of the old access road. The trailhead into the barkline tract was unmarked, deliberately so. No welcome sign, no trail guide kiosk. Just a chain-link gate, rust-eaten and crooked, half-swallowed by creeping vines. Beyond it, 5 square miles of unstudied forestland, a wet knot in the heart of the county map, labeled only as barkline, CRESTRICTIONS. The trees were tall, taller than they should have been. Pines, birch, and sycamore clustered so tightly that morning light dissolved into pale fog a few steps beyond the threshold. Wind passed around the forest, never through it. The air inside didn't move, but it wasn't still either. It listened. Carmen felt it before she heard it, a subtle pressure, like sound without source, like something had been waiting just beyond the threshold to exhale. She raised her radio mic. Audio log. Barkline 01, initial entry. Time 08:14, sky clear, equipment green. The barkline boundary is as described in the briefing, total overgrowth. No signs of trail maintenance. Feels off. Damp in the air, but no actual moisture. I'll be heading toward the northern ridge to begin sensor placement. She clicked the mic off. The click didn't echo. It just stopped midair, like sound fell inward here instead of traveling out. By the time Carmen reached the first waypoint, a narrow bluff overlooking a moss-choked creek, her GPS had already rebooted twice. The map jittered. Time stamps skipped. One log entry made at 8:45 was already marked 9:11. She stared at the time, tapped the unit, looked at the sky again, still morning, but her breath was heavier now, and something faint tickled at the edge of her hearing, not a sound exactly, more like the memory of one. Distant, low, not a voice, but too patterned to be wind. She turned to scan the woods behind her. Nothing. The trees stood still, unnaturally still, as if posing. Audio log, barkline 02, sensor 1 deployed. GPS unstable, time log feels unreliable. Might be solar interference, but I'm noting strange sound artifacts. Could be nothing, moving deeper. As she walked, the trail narrowed to little more than an animal path, though she'd been told there were no game trails this deep. The ground sloped gradually down, and with every step the silence pressed harder. Then her radio crackled faint, garbled static. She stopped, lifted the receiver. The static sharpened. Then, "Don't forget your scarf, it's cold out there." Carmen froze. That voice, that wasn't broadcast chatter. That was her mother's voice, soft, brittle, and distinct, from a memory Carmen hadn't recalled in years. Audio log. Barkline 03 fragment. Repeat, hearing playback anomalies. Radio intercepts mimicking. Interference. Childhood memory, confirming hallucination or echo. We'll review logs after exfil. She didn't speak again for miles. Chapter 2, static beneath the pines. The forest had closed in around her by morning. The edges of the barkline tract were like a net, not visible, not even felt right away. But once you crossed it, the air tightened around your chest and the trees leaned just a little closer together. Carmen Velez had barely slept. Her tent, pitched just inside the perimeter, had remained dry despite a forecast for rain. The leaves didn't shift. No wind had touched the branches above. She should have felt lucky. Instead, she woke with the distinct impression that someone had been standing just outside the nylon fabric, breathing, listening. She zipped herself out and stood still. Nothing moved. Her boots crunched softly in the loam. She glanced up, tall spruce, pine, and beech, all death, still in the morning hush. But it wasn't the silence that unnerved her. It was the way it behaved. No birdsong, no insects. Not even her own steps seemed to carry beyond a few feet before the sound was swallowed. She touched her chest. The clip-on mic was still attached. She reached for the small recorder at her hip, pressed play. WHHHSSSHDK, her voice played back. Placing sensor 1. North-northwest quadrant. Soil seems untouched. Still no signs of erosion. Still no signs of anything living. Sound seems folded in on itself. That's the best way I can put it. She paused the playback. She didn't remember saying that last part, and she definitely didn't remember her voice sounding so flat, like something echoing through a hallway too long abandoned. Still, she moved forward. By midday, Carmen had placed 2 of the 5 acoustic sensors she'd packed, small grey boxes designed to pick up even subsonic vibration. But in both locations, the red LED blinked error codes. Signal blocked. Audio corrupt. Reformat recommended. And each time she tried to review the recordings, she heard not silence, but something worse. On the second file, recorded beside a shallow creek that hadn't flowed in years, she caught her own voice saying, "I'll sleep under bark tonight. The soil wants my weight." She ripped out the battery. By dusk, Carmen returned to camp. But something was off. She'd marked her site with flagging tape, a strip of neon green tied around a crooked birch. It was gone, replaced by red, and her tent was slightly off its footprint. Still staked, still zipped, but tilted just a few degrees to the left, like someone had tried to move it, then changed their mind. The backpack she'd left inside had been unzipped. Her journal was open to a page she hadn't written yet. In bold, careful letters that did match her handwriting, it read, Chapter 2, Static beneath the pines, I am not the first to enter. I will not be the last to leave. But something already knows my name. Carmen read it 3 times, then looked up. The trees stood motionless, but the mist that had begun curling through the brush hours ago now pooled thickly around her ankles, climbing. It smelled faintly of copper, and the static, soft at first, began to hum again in her radio's earpiece. CRKKKK, Carmen, beneath, roots, come home. She tore the headset off. She didn't remember turning the radio back on. Chapter 3, the root line. Carmen didn't sleep that night. She sat in the tent with her knees pulled to her chest, the cold rising through the nylon floor like breath from a sleeping beast. Outside, the bark line lay motionless under its too dark canopy, a place of shadow not cast by absence of light, but by something older, denser. When she shut her eyes, she kept seeing the journal page, Chapter 2. Static beneath the pines, and beneath it, her own handwriting threading out sentences she'd never written. Each time she blinked, the phrases twisted slightly. I will not be the last to leave. Became, I was never meant to leave. Became, leave. Leave, leave, leave. At 4:03 a.m., she gave up trying. The sky never lightened. There was no sun to rise, just a slow dulling of the black above and the strange twilight the bark line seemed to favor. She packed up, shouldered her equipment, and began hiking toward the western quadrant of the tract. Her map was useless. GPS kept flickering, signal loss, coordinate drift, and once it showed her walking directly into the center of a lake that had been dry for decades. Mid-morning, she passed a tree with deep vertical grooves in its trunk, like claws had raked it decades ago. She paused to run her hand along the marks. No sap bled from them, no insects. The tree felt hollow. She placed a palm against the bark. Nothing, no sound, no vibration. Then faint, nearly imagined, she heard it. Not from the tree, inside it. A whisper like paper rubbed against paper. She jerked her hand away. An hour later, she stumbled into what might once have been a trail. overgrown and softened by rot, but it wound between tightly knit spruce that leaned toward one another like conspirators. As she walked, she noticed something else: footprints. Her own boots, same tread, same weight, one set heading forward. She slowed, knelt. They weren't her current steps, the ground was undisturbed. These were older, faded, maybe a day, two. She followed. The prints wound in a gentle curve for nearly a mile, circled a small ring of mushrooms, then vanished completely into the middle of a shallow depression in the soil. She stepped into the hollow, looked down. No exit trail, no scuffed edge, no drag marks, just the deep impression of one final footprint, heel down, toe forward, like whoever had left it had stepped through the earth and vanished. She backed away, slowly. By late afternoon, Carmen set up a temporary outpost beneath a crooked pine with 5 main branches that all curved in the same unnatural arc, like fingers pointing west. She placed another acoustic sensor, double-checked her settings, then activated the receiver. This time it recorded. The playback crackled, hissed, then resolved into sound. Breath, shallow, near to the mic. Then a voice, her own. If I let it speak through me, maybe it'll stop digging. A pause. It knows my lungs now. That's how it gets the sound right. She turned off the recording. Her hands shook. She wiped them on her pants. The forest was still, utterly. But Carmen could feel it listening. Not in metaphor, not as superstition. She pressed her palm into the soil. It was warm, and it pulsed just once like a slow heartbeat. That night, her dreams were filled with the sound of her own voice, screaming beneath the earth, mouth packed with dirt, lungs full of roots, repeating a phrase she would wake up mouthing without memory. We are the bark. We are the line. Let us in. Chapter 4, Topographies of Silence. Carmen hiked with her breath held. Not consciously, not at first. But a mile into her westward route, she realized she'd been walking in staggered inhales, like her lungs feared drawing in too much of whatever passed for air in the bark line. The silence here had a texture, not the comforting hush of remoteness. This was the kind of silence that had weight, as if it were filling in for something else, something that had been stripped away. The moment she exhaled fully, her ears popped. A low whine just on the edge of hearing vibrated through her skull like pressure in a diving bell. She blinked. Something on the trail ahead shifted. A flicker of movement too quick to register. She spun toward it. Nothing, just trees. Yet their branches no longer swayed. Not even slightly. Not with the breeze. Not even when she moved past them. She stopped for water near a thick patch of ferns. Her canteen felt oddly light. When she unscrewed the cap, the liquid inside didn't slosh. It sat still, motionless, even when she tilted the bottle slightly. It wasn't frozen. It wasn't empty. It simply wouldn't move. Her hands trembled. Carmen screwed the lid back on and tucked it into her bag, pretending it hadn't happened. She made camp under a slanted rock face covered in moss. The lichen spread in spiral patterns she couldn't identify, like thumbprints pressed into velvet. When she ran her fingers over the spirals, a low, static buzz formed in her teeth. The kind you feel just before a thunderclap. She withdrew her hand. That night, the dream returned. She was walking through the forest again, only this time, everything she touched disintegrated into ash. The trees, the ground, her own skin. Her breath turned to soot and spilled from her lips in black clouds. But something else was speaking inside the ash. Her voice, again, whispering in a tongue she didn't know but understood. Lay down, the shape of you is wrong. Let us remember you better. Mouth full of bark, eyes full of loam. She woke gasping, soil clinging to her hands. Her boots were laced, but with twine, not shoelaces, and both were covered in damp moss. She hadn't left her tent. She was sure she hadn't. Yet outside there were footprints around the camp. Her boots, pacing in a wide, slow circle, 12 times around. She counted. 12. Exactly. At dawn, she found a clearing shaped like an ear. The trees on either side leaned inward, not bowed, but grown that way, as though the entire forest had tilted to listen. At the center of the clearing was a rusted metal stake driven into the soil, no taller than her calf. A tag hung from it, corroded but legible. USFS Velez. See Station Echo/Grid 17. She hadn't placed that. She hadn't even been to Grid 17. Carmen backed out of the clearing, not turning her back until she reached the tree line. Later, she tried to radio back to headquarters. The line connected, but emitted only a strange, rhythmic clicking, like someone tapping their nails on teeth. Then her voice. "This is Carmen. Location verified. Sensors active. Tracking progression of static." Then again her voice. "This is Carmen. Location verified. Sensors active. Tracking." But this time, there was something wrong with the inflection, the cadence. A perfect imitation missing whatever made it human. She turned the radio off, left it off. She updated her map by hand, but every time she looked away, the ink shifted. Lines curved subtly. Landmarks she'd sketched reoriented themselves. One tree, which she'd marked 3 miles south, now appeared 20 feet from her current camp, drawn with shaking hands and dark, almost angry lines. She stared at the map. The land wasn't responding to her. It was using her, redrawing itself through her hand. The last sound she heard before sleep was the wind whispering just beneath the edge of hearing. "The voice will fit you soon." Chapter 5, Parroting the Self. It doesn't have to learn you. You're already echo. By the 5th morning, Carmen no longer trusted her own voice. She awoke with words already in her throat, not thoughts. Words, half-spoken syllables pressed against her teeth like they'd been waiting in the night for her to wake up and give them exit. "I never left," she whispered. She hadn't meant to say it. She spent the early morning climbing a hill densely packed with long-needled pines. The bark here had grown in strange overlapping ribbons, like calluses or layers of skin trying to scab over an open wound. When her gloved hand brushed against one, it moved, just slightly, but enough to remind her of something breathing in shallow pulses. Every step she took sent the same phrase into her mind, like a sonar ping. "You're too loud." She reached a bluff with a clearer line of sky and decided to try her audio logs again. Just to document, just to hear something human. She turned on the mic. Day 5. Continuing west toward the, her voice. But not hers, a perfect mimic. Overlaying, slipping in between her words, timed just wrong enough to notice. She froze, played the tape back. Silence. Nothing. She tried again. The mimicry was back, but this time it spoke before her. Day 5, west of the bluff, cloud cover, bones. Carmen hadn't said bones. She stopped the recording, hands shaking. The next few hours blurred. She wandered farther west. The trees thinned, then thickened again, not in any natural pattern, but in a dizzying, fractal geometry. In one grove, the same crooked tree appeared 5 times in a row, identical down to a strip of peeling bark shaped like a crescent moon. She marked one with a small strip of red tape. When she passed it a second time, she marked it again. When she reached it a third time, the second strip of tape was already there, waiting. She vomited. The sound of it didn't echo. Near dusk, she heard her own laughter coming from the trees. Not a memory, not hallucinated, just 5 paces behind her. Slow, breathless, not wrong, just empty. Like something was using the shape of her lungs, but not the intention. "Let's do it again." She spun, flashlight beam flaring into the trees. Nothing moved. The branches still hung in their stillness, untouched by wind. No leaves rustled. Even the air felt paused. She whispered, "I don't want to hear that again," from somewhere deeper in the woods. "You will." She found footprints in the soil that night. Her size, her tread, her laces tied the exact way she'd done them that morning. Only these boots had left no entry path. They began beside her tent, circled 3 times, then walked back into the woods. She followed them. They looped, turned, crossed a stream without leaving watermarks. She kept following, into thicker woods, denser silence, until she realized the footprints had doubled. 2 sets, one still hers, the other, not wrong, just lazier, as if someone mimicked her gait without understanding how ankles worked. They ended at a tree covered in moss. The bark at eye level was smooth and imprinted with a subtle hollow, ear-shaped. She returned to camp, tried to sleep, didn't. When she closed her eyes, the sound came back, not words, not yet, just the wet click of a tongue against teeth. Then her voice again. "Don't leave me behind this time." By morning, she'd filled 12 pages of her field journal. 3 of them were not in her handwriting, but they were signed, Carmen Velez. Chapter 6, The Weight of Stillness. It isn't silence, it's holding its breath. Carmen stopped using the term quiet to describe the barkline tract. It wasn't accurate. Silence, she realized, was a lack, an absence. This was a presence, a suspension. Like every tree, every patch of moss, every square inch of humid air was actively choosing not to make a sound. She found herself whispering out of habit, not to avoid making noise, to avoid breaking trust, because it felt now like the forest was listening for her every footfall, and if she startled it, it might answer. She moved deeper into the tract. She had long stopped trusting the compass. Her paper maps no longer aligned with the terrain. The elevation lines meant nothing here. Hills rose where none were drawn, and creeks appeared where no blue ink had ever flowed. Her only landmarks were the trees that repeated, and the loud patches, strange circular clearings where the silence broke for just long enough to deliver something. The buzz of a fly with no visible source, the click of a dead branch, the sound of breathing that always stopped when she turned. In one of these clearings, she paused, noticed that her boots were making the exact same scuffing pattern she remembered from the looped path the night before, as if the forest had recorded her gait, and now it was playing it back. She found the first deer skull midday, balanced upright on a stump. The antlers were missing. The inside had been hollowed clean, not chewed, not scavenged, etched, as if something had written in reverse against the bone and scraped its memory away. Inside the skull, barely visible, a loop of magnetic tape. She didn't have the recorder with her, just her field radio. So she coiled the tape carefully, placed it in her side pouch. That night, she played it on her backup field recorder. Her voice came through immediately, clearer than it should have been. Carmen Velez, Day 3. West Quadrant logging site. She hadn't recorded anything on Day 3. Blood in the barkline. We smell it. Don't come back this way, Carmen. You can't undo the roots. Then silence. Then, do you remember where you buried the first one? She turned it off. She did not sleep. In the morning, she awoke to a new sound. Children, faint, giggling, coming from behind the tent. Carmen froze. Then the giggling shifted, twisted mid-note, like a cassette being crushed under a boot. She unzipped the tent. Nothing, just brush. She turned to scan the tree line again. A small bird, the first she'd seen in days, sat perched on a crooked branch. It opened its beak. "You'll rot cleanly," it said in her voice. "We'll grow through you." It didn't fly away. It simply blinked, once, then again, then fell from the branch, dead before it hit the ground. Later that afternoon, she walked past a tree with a long, horizontal scar in the bark, as if struck once by lightning. Pinned to the scar with a forestry nail was a photograph. Old, grainy, printed on thick archival paper, slightly curled. It showed a surveyor female standing on a bluff with a pine forest behind her. Her face was blurred in the photo, time-washed, but the jacket, identical to Carmen's. Even the stitching on the pocket torn and hand-mended the same way she had done last winter. She flipped the photo over, writing in thin red ink, "No more use." She didn't return to camp that night. Couldn't find it. She should have. Her GPS still blinked the location marker. But every time she moved toward it, she ended up somewhere else. Same grove, same scarred tree, same deer skull. Only now it faced the other direction, looking at her. The forest didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a brain, and she was in the part that remembered, or wanted to, and she was the echo it had trapped in its folds. Chapter 7, Pathways That Don't Forgive. The ground doesn't forget. It waits. Carmen tried to walk in a straight line. She marked trees with orange forestry ribbon, tied high so undergrowth wouldn't obscure them. Every 10 steps, she tied another. The spools were supposed to last her a week. By hour 3, she was down to a quarter-roll and staring at a ribbon fluttering on a tree she'd already marked. She stood still, focused on the rustling. There was no wind. The ribbon was moving anyway, tugging like it was caught in a breath that came from inside the bark. Her boots grew heavier. She assumed it was exhaustion, lack of food, dehydration maybe. But when she knelt to rest, she realized the laces were caked in soil, not just from the hike, but fresh, wet, clinging like the forest was trying to pull her under. She scraped it away with a stick. Chunks peeled off. Smelled wrong, like loam and bleach, like something preserved underground. She checked the solace. Embedded in the tread was a shard of broken glass. Embedded in the glass, a scrap of photographic emulsion. When she pried it free and held it to the light, she could just make out a familiar shape. A shoulder, a throat, her own. The photo had been taken from behind her. She climbed a ridge to get perspective. The view stretched unbroken and wrong. Hills where none had been yesterday. Pine boughs moving out of sync, like the treetops breathed independent of the trunks. She saw no birds, no squirrels, no clouds. But the sun was still moving fast, like it was being sped up somewhere above the canopy. Her watch had frozen at 12:44. At the summit of the ridge, she found something buried beneath a drift of pine needles. A wooden marker, no text, just a carved spiral burned into the center. Next to it, another photo. This one wasn't printed. It was developing in front of her as if exposed seconds ago. At first, just grayscale blur, then detail, then a tent, her tent, and standing beside it, slightly out of focus, herself, or someone wearing her. Not just the same gear, the same stance, the same expression, only the smile was wrong. It was too wide, too certain, and she was holding something, a shovel. Carmen dropped the photo, her fingers tingled. The nerves in her hand fizzled like the air was ionizing around her. Behind her, the snap of a twig. She turned. Nothing, not even a branch out of place. Then a print, right beside hers in the soft soil, not left there before, still sinking. Identical tread, same weight, they faced the same direction. She wasn't being followed. She was walking beside herself. She radioed the field station. Static. Then, after 30 seconds of white hiss, a voice came through. Her own. Carmen Velez, barkline Tract surveyor. If you hear this, don't answer. It knows how you sound now. Then silence. Then a whisper just under the static. Don't find the roots. They already know you. By nightfall, she had made camp in a clearing that seemed clean. No bones, no photos, no ribbons. She slept against a log, woke up beneath a different tree. There were no signs of movement, no prints or drag marks. Only her notebook, open to a page she didn't remember writing. Day 7. Soil knows the shape of what stood here. My legs don't ache anymore. My skin feels like it isn't mine, but it listens better than I ever did. She slammed the book shut and realized the pencil still sat in her hand. Fresh graphite under her nails. Chapter 8, the place where maps unravel. She tried to draw the forest. It drew her back. Carmen no longer trusted paper. Her topographic maps had started warping, the contours wrong, like the elevation was folding inward on itself. Elevation lines bled together, peaks flattened, valleys reversed. Even the ink smudged under dry fingers. Worse, the map from yesterday didn't match the one she marked today. Trails she'd blazed, with clear orange flagging, weren't there when she returned. When she followed her own markings, they led her in wide, lazy loops back to the exact same tree. She tried to redraw them from memory. The resulting sketch looked like veins, or roots. She sat with her back to a dead pine and checked her compass. The needle spun. She laid out the bark line coordinates on her GPS again. The screen blinked. Coordinates shifted by 0.0001 degrees. Then again. Then again. It was moving her while she stood still. The next clearing she stumbled into wasn't natural, not even close. A circle had been flattened in the forest floor, 30 feet across. In its center, a thick knot of hair and cloth twisted together like a fungal mass. She circled it. Animal at first glance, matted and musky, but threaded with human fibers. Shirt fabric, backpack strap, a patch sewn with the forestry department emblem. She touched it with a branch. It hissed. She stepped back as steam rose from the pile, or was it breath? It carried a smell not of rot, but of sweat, cedar oil, and fear. Her fear. Something mimicking scent memory. That night, she tried to review her field recordings, not just audio, but video too. She had a body cam clipped to her jacket. The files were corrupted, not broken, overwritten. The first 3 clips played fine, hiking in, setting up base, logging sensor placements. But then on the 4th file, her body cam footage abruptly shifted. The video glitched, froze, and when it resumed, she was watching herself. Lying down. Still, the angle was off, low to the ground, from between two roots, like the camera had been buried. Her own face stared back at her, serene and unaware. Then movement, in the periphery. A shadow, impossibly tall, stepped behind her. Not close, just looming. Then the clip ended. She hadn't seen any of that. She hadn't laid down there. She never turned off the camera. By morning, her GPS had updated again. A new path. A straight line that hadn't been there before. The display read 0.3 my destination. The knot. It shouldn't have had that function. There was no place, named the knot, in any forestry database. She clicked for more info. The screen stuttered, then flickered, then showed a single phrase. You've walked this before, beneath yourself. Against her better judgment, she followed it. The forest changed again. The air got thicker, like walking underwater. Each breath took effort. Trees angled toward her. Roots broke the surface like veins erupting from skin. Birds still gone. No insects. Only her steps, and even those felt muffled. She reached the coordinates. A hill, artificial in its symmetry. At its peak, a tree she didn't recognize but felt she should. Bark a sickly green, sap running clear. She walked in circles around it, 7 times, then stopped. At its base was a hole, just big enough for a person to lie in, half filled with damp pine needles and the shape of someone recently risen. There were no boot prints, but the impression was the same size as her body. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She simply sat beside the hollow and opened her notebook. The first page, the one she hadn't written in yet, now read. Chapter 8, You Are Where You've Been, and beneath it, in her own looping handwriting, I never left. I'm in the roots now. If you hear me, turn around. Chapter 9, Rootbound. She walked to leave. The forest walked with her. Carmen left the hollow at dawn. Or at least what she thought was dawn. The sky never lightened, only dulled from black to a dim slate, as if the sun had been buried under wet cement. The birdsong never returned. The wind, once cool and directional, now just hovered around her, listless and stale. But she could feel the forest had shifted again. It no longer tried to keep her lost. It was trying to keep her here. Her boots sank deeper into the forest floor. The ground had softened overnight, loamy, wet, like something had churned the soil from beneath. Not muddy, not rain damp, disturbed. She tried retracing her path, GPS still useless, compass still spinning, but she remembered the terrain. She thought she remembered, but the landscape rearranged itself in impossibly subtle ways. A tree stump once on her left was now behind her. A ravine she'd marked was gone. A dry creek bed now ran uphill. Her trail markers had vanished. The orange flagging tape she'd wrapped around trunks was replaced by curling strands of grey bark that mimicked the shape almost perfectly. One marker remained, though. A solitary pine, carved with a symbol she didn't recognize, a spiraling, root-like pattern that bled sap when she touched it. That was the first time she felt it. The tug, not physical, not emotional. A pull somewhere behind the sternum. Like the gravity of the bark line was no longer external, but internal, recentering her, making her the axis of the forest's slow spin, and her boots began to stick. She sat to rest beside a wide tree split down the middle. The split looked unnatural, like the tree had grown away from itself, and inside was a cavity large enough to crawl into. She felt compelled to reach into it. Her fingers brushed something wet. She yanked her hand back. It was a journal, her own, worn, swollen with rain. Pages fluttering with writing in a script, but none she remembered composing. She flipped through it. Day logs, weather reports, notes on sensor positions. Then, heard myself again, but not an echo. It knew what I was about to say. The trees correct the map after I draw them. They grow wrong on purpose. Something buried me here once. It's not finished. And finally, I should not have looked into the hollow. That night, she dreamt she was beneath the forest, not underground, beneath it. The trees grew downward, roots skyward, and she lay spread-eagle at the forest's base. From her navel sprouted a thin red vine, curling up and up, piercing the inverted canopy above. She awoke with dirt under her fingernails, and her boots were off, neatly placed beside her sleeping bag. The radio crackled, her field radio, long since declared inoperable, static at first. Then a voice, her voice, but not now her, sick her, soil her. The tone was moist, tongue too thick, words spoken like they were remembered incorrectly. You left the bones in backwards, Carmen, but the bark still knows your shape. Lie still, let us fix you. The radio hissed, then died. She threw it into the trees. It landed with a wet thump like hitting flesh. That afternoon, she attempted to hike west, toward the coordinates of her drop point, where the forestry team was due to retrieve her in 2 days. Her progress was steady for a time. The terrain finally began to resemble her original entry route. She passed a marker, her marker, the initials CV etched in a sapling, a sign of hope. Then, 50 feet later, she saw it again. The same tree, the same carving. And 50 feet beyond that, again. 3 identical trees spaced precisely. She backtracked, 50 feet back, 3 more, each carved with CV, each fresh. As if the forest was copying her trail in real time, echoing her every step behind and in front of her. That evening, she found the first tooth, half buried in the soil beside her tent. Not old, not fossilized, clean, wet at the root. A molar, human, she didn't remember losing one. Then a hand mirror she never packed, lying face down beside the fire pit. When she turned it over, she saw her reflection, and in her mouth something missing. As night fell, the forest grew warmer. Too warm, humidity clung to her skin like a living thing, every surface sweated. Trees pulsed faintly with sap that smelled like breath. And the roots, they were moving, not fast, not visibly, but in every new step she took, they were closer, curling across the floor of the forest like veins drawn to heat. She didn't sleep. She stood by the fire all night, watching the dark, feeling the land breathe with her rhythm. In the morning, she woke anyway, lying down, boots off again, the fire long dead. But a ring of roots now encircled her camp, not touching her, but poised like animals waiting for a command. And in the center of that ring, nestled in the ash, a new tooth, still warm, still bleeding. Chapter 10, Becoming Soil. This is Carmen. I never left. I'm in the roots now. If you hear me, turn around. Carmen didn't move for hours. The tooth sat at the center of the ash ring like a ritual offering, small, bloody, still glistening. The roots didn't advance, but they didn't retreat either. They just waited, flexing slowly like the breath of something dreaming. By now she had stopped wondering who or what was doing this. The forest was not a place. It was a will. It had been shaping her since day one, trimming her edges, dulling her resistance, planting itself in her thoughts until they no longer sounded like her own. She was no longer surveying it. She was being surveyed, and it had decided she fit. Around midday, Carmen fled. She didn't know in which direction. There was no more compass, no sun, no clear sense of time. But something in her snapped. She needed motion, not answers, not survival, just the illusion of a way. She ran until her legs buckled, until her feet bled, until her throat scraped raw with dry sobs. The forest didn't resist her anymore. That was the worst part. It simply watched. She came upon the ranger camp near dusk. It appeared like a mirage, a break in the trees, a long-rotted canvas tent, a splintered fire ring, and a lean-to with a rusted forestry symbol burned into the wood. Moss had grown up the posts like claws. The air here was hot, syrupy, and too quiet. No insects, no birds, just the creaking of slowly decaying things. Inside the tent, she found the remains of another surveyor. The bones were nearly clean, clothes intact but sun-bleached. A satchel, a field recorder, a plastic clipboard half melted, and a notebook. She flipped it open with trembling hands. The script was tight. Panicked. Day 11, something in the forest is copying me. It knows when I lie. It whispers truths I haven't said yet. Day 14, I woke up with dirt in my throat. I think it's trying to replant me. Day 17, it's not alive, not like we are, but it remembers life. It remembers bodies. Day 19, I saw myself watching me from the hollow. I wasn't blinking. Day 22, my voice on the radio said I'm safe now. I don't trust me anymore. Carmen dropped the book, and that's when the radio crackled again. It was her voice, but this time weaker, wetter, as if being broadcast from underwater. This is Carmen. I never left. She stepped back. I'm in the roots now. The radio buzzed, warped, then again. If you hear me, turn around. And Carmen, against every instinct, did. There was no one behind her. only trees, and beneath one of them something new, a pine that hadn't been there the day before, still young, still slick with sap, and tangled at the base of its roots, a pair of boots, hers. She walked to them slowly, step by step, unable to stop herself. The roots curled protectively around the boots like fingers closing a fist. One boot was torn slightly at the toe. She recognized the rip. The laces were tied in a knot. The soil around them had been freshly turned, and something within it breathed. She reached out, touched bark. It was warm. The tree throbbed faintly like a vein. She pressed her ear to the trunk and heard herself screaming, but not from now, not from here, from beneath, from inside. Then the final realization came, heavy, wet, inescapable. She had been here before, not just these woods, not just this clearing, this moment, over and over. She had found the camp before, found the boots before, heard the voice. Dug, cried, bled, broken, reseeded. The forest didn't let her leave because it already had her, and all this was the after. The next morning, the barkline extraction team arrived at the edge of the tract. They waited for Carmen. She did not appear. Her emergency beacon was never activated. Her last radio transmission, recorded 48 hours earlier, played only static, except for one faint message in the background. "If you hear me, turn around," they sent in a retrieval team. Found her tent, found her gear, found a tree that hadn't existed in prior scans. And at its base, peeking just barely through the roots, a third tooth, still clean, still warm. You made it back for now, but the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video, subscribe, but know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.